In the small town of Willowbrook where nothing much ever changed, the arrival of a newcomer was an event that could spark endless whispers. The town's rhythm was steady, predictable, and everyone knew everyone else. When a new face appeared, curiosity spread like wildfire. That's how Alex became the center of attention. He wasn't the kind of person to draw eyes through flashy clothes or an outgoing personality. He wore simple, dark clothes that didn't stand out, and his posture was relaxed, as if he didn't care what anyone thought. He was tall but not overly muscular, and his gaze was distant, often lost in thought, giving nothing away. On his first day at Willowbrook High, Alex quietly chose a seat at the back of the classroom. He didn't try to make friends, didn't chat with anyone, and avoided anything that could lead to conflict. His silence made him an enigma, a person who didn't try to fit into the small-town mold and that drew the attention of the wrong people. At the top of the social hierarchy at Willowbrook High were Jason and his gang, athletes who believed they ruled the school. Jason was the typical arrogant leader, tall, confident, and the coach's son. He and his friends had a habit of testing newcomers, sizing them up and taking them down a peg or two. To them, Alex was just another quiet kid, a potential target for their usual bullying. One afternoon, during lunch, Alex sat alone at a table, his food untouched. Jason saw the perfect opportunity to assert his dominance. With a confident swagger, he walked over, slamming his hand down on the table in front of Alex. "Hey, new guy," Jason sneered. "Not planning to join a team or anything? Or are you just another loser?" Alex didn't flinch. He slowly lifted his eyes to meet Jason's, his gaze unwavering, before calmly returning to his meal. He didn't speak, didn't show any signs of fear, and that was enough to anger Jason and his friends. "Is he mute?" one of Jason's cronies mocked. "Or is he just too scared to speak?" Another added, "He's probably a coward." But Alex didn't answer. He didn't need to. He stood up, grabbed his tray, and left without a word. And as he walked out, the bullies watched in frustration. They wanted a reaction. But Alex had given them nothing. Not yet. Jason and his gang weren't the type to back down easily. They were used to breaking people down, to seeing fear in the eyes of their targets. But Alex, with his impenetrable calm and silence, wasn't giving them the reaction they craved. To them, it was frustrating. A challenge. And challenges meant more fun. They weren't going to let him slip through without making him pay for his indifference. The next few days were filled with small, petty acts designed to provoke Alex. They'd bump into him in the hallways, knock his books from his arms, and whisper insults just loud enough for him to hear. But Alex did nothing. He didn't respond to the taunts, didn't flinch at the pranks. He simply went about his day, his expression unchanged. The more Jason pushed, the more Alex remained unmoved. And the more frustrated they became. In their world, bullying was a game, a way to assert dominance. Alex, however, wasn't playing by their rules. His silence made them nervous. It made them question what he was thinking. It wasn't until one afternoon, as Alex was leaving school, that things took a darker turn. Jason and his gang, sensing an opportunity, blocked Alex's path as he walked toward the gates. They stood there, blocking his way, grinning like predators circling their prey. "You're a hard guy to crack, new guy," Jason said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But don't worry. We'll fix that." Alex didn't respond. He simply looked at them, his eyes calm and unblinking. One of Jason's friends sneered, "Not much of a talker, huh? Guess that makes you a coward." Still, Alex said nothing. He didn't take the bait, didn't let their words get under his skin. But Jason wasn't satisfied. He was determined to break him. Without warning, Mason, the biggest of the bullies, shoved Alex. It wasn't a hard shove, just enough to see if he would react. Alex staggered slightly but regained his balance quickly. He didn't raise his fists, didn't show anger. The bullies watched, waiting for him to explode in frustration or fear. But Alex did nothing. Jason smirked. "What's wrong, new guy? You scared?" he taunted. But in Alex's eyes, there was something that made Jason pause. It was a flicker of something dangerous, something that didn't belong to a coward. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it lingered in Jason's mind. Alex wasn't afraid. Not of them. And maybe, just maybe, they were messing with the wrong person. But for now, Jason and his friends walked away, convinced they had won. What they didn't know was that Alex wasn't just a silent, weak kid. He was something more. He wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't afraid of anything. He had just been waiting. Waiting for the right moment to show them what he was really capable of. And that moment was coming. The days that followed were no better. If anything, the bullying only intensified. Jason and his gang grew more relentless, pushing Alex to his limits. It started with the same petty tricks, bumping into him in the hallways, stealing his lunch, making cruel remarks. But it didn't stop there. They took it further. Jason and his friends tripped him in the hallways, shoved him into lockers, and spread rumors that Alex was weak and cowardly. Yet, no matter what they did, Alex remained silent. It was becoming clear to everyone around them that Alex wasn't going to react, no matter how hard they tried to provoke him. The bullies' frustration was mounting, and the more they failed to break him, the more desperate they became. To them, Alex's calmness felt like a challenge. They didn't understand why he wouldn't fight back, why he didn't show fear. But that's what Jason and his friends failed to realize. Alex wasn't scared of them. He had been trained to remain composed in the face of adversity, to keep his emotions in check, to know when to fight and when to walk away. He wasn't some random kid who could be pushed around easily. He was something else entirely. One cold afternoon, as Alex walked home from school, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He had heard these footsteps too many times before. Jason, Mason, and 2 other bullies were following him, their voices muffled but unmistakable. "Where you going, new guy?" Jason sneered, catching up with Alex. "Thought we'd walk you home." Alex didn't respond, keeping his pace steady. He was done with this game. "I'm not interested," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. Mason scoffed. "You're not interested? Too bad. We don't care what you want." They closed in on him, blocking his path. Alex looked around quickly, no teachers, no witnesses. Just him and them in the quiet of the afternoon. This was the moment Jason had been waiting for. He had cornered Alex, pushed him to the edge. He was going to break him. "You're not so tough, are you?" Jason taunted, stepping closer. "What are you hiding, huh?" Before Mason could reach him, Alex moved faster than any of them expected. In one smooth motion, he twisted Mason's arm, pulled him off balance, and sent him crashing to the ground. Mason gasped in pain, clutching his wrist. The other bullies stood frozen, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. Jason's cocky smirk faltered as he looked at Alex. What the Jason started, but he was cut off when Alex turned to face them, his expression still eerily calm. "I'm done playing your game," Alex said, his voice cold and final. For the first time, Jason hesitated. He had pushed Alex, thinking he was dealing with just another quiet, scared kid. But Alex wasn't scared. He wasn't scared of them. And now they were starting to realize they had made a mistake. A big one. With that, Alex turned and walked away, leaving Mason groaning on the ground and the others standing there, unsure of what to do next. The message was clear: Alex wasn't a target. He wasn't someone to mess with. And Jason and his gang had just learned the hard way. But this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. And Alex knew it. What they didn't realize was that their little game was about to escalate, and Alex was ready. The morning after Alex's confrontation with Jason and his gang, things at Willowbrook High felt different. The air was charged with tension. The students who had witnessed the scene were whispering, the rumors already swirling. Mason, despite his attempts to act tough, couldn't hide the discomfort in his movements. He was avoiding eye contact with anyone, his wrist still sore from the unexpected fall. Jason, on the other hand, was seething. He was not the type to back down, not from anyone, especially not from someone he had underestimated so badly. He had never been challenged like this, and it gnawed at him. He needed to prove a point, needed to restore his image as the undisputed king of the school. The humiliation he had suffered yesterday wasn't something he could just let go. That afternoon, Jason and his friends gathered in the back of the school behind the gym. Word had already started to spread. They had set up a confrontation. Jason was determined to teach Alex a lesson, to remind him and the whole school that no one crossed Jason and lived to tell the tale. Alex, however, remained unfazed. He had heard the whispers in the halls, the whispers that promised a showdown after school. But he didn't care about the attention. He wasn't here to make friends, and certainly not to prove anything to a group of bullies. He was simply going to finish what had started and let the chips fall where they may. When the final bell rang, students filed out of the building, eager to see the drama unfold. A crowd began to form behind the gym, buzzing with excitement. Alex walked toward the gathering, his face unreadable, his steps calm and deliberate. Jason's gang was already there, standing in a loose circle, waiting. There was Mason, nursing his sore wrist, and a few more of Jason's friends. They all looked at Alex with a mix of disdain and anticipation. 5 against 1. It should have been an easy win for them. Jason stepped forward with a sneer on his face, his arms crossed. "Glad you could make it, new guy," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Thought we'd teach you a little lesson. It's time you learned who's really in charge around here." Alex didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the others. He simply looked at Jason, his expression cold. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, his voice steady, almost bored. Jason laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Too bad. You don't get a choice." Without another word, Mason lunged at Alex, a blur of motion aimed to knock him off balance. But Alex was faster. With a fluid twist, he sidestepped Mason, grabbing his arm and throwing him effortlessly onto the ground. Mason groaned, clutching his back, unable to move for a moment. The crowd gasped. They had expected a fight, but not like this. Not with such precision, such control. One of Jason's other goons rushed at Alex, throwing a wild punch. Alex ducked, and before the bully could react, Alex's elbow connected sharply with his ribs, sending him staggering back, winded and shocked. 2 down. The crowd was beginning to cheer, and a new energy filled the air. No one was rooting for the bullies anymore. They wanted to see justice. Jason's face twisted in fury. He had underestimated Alex, but he wasn't going to back down now. "Get him," he yelled. The last 2 bullies rushed at Alex, but he moved like lightning. One swing, one dodge, and Alex caught one of them by the wrist, twisting it behind his back and sending him crashing into the other, knocking them both to the ground. Now it was just Jason. The crowd grew silent as Jason, the so-called king of Willowbrook High, stood facing Alex. His fists were clenched, his body tense. For the first time, he hesitated. His confidence wavered. Alex stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Jason's. "You still think you run this place?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Jason's chest heaved with anger, but his hesitation was clear. He wasn't so sure anymore. Alex smirked, his eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. "You're not worth it," he said, turning on his heel and walking away. The silence that followed was deafening. No one dared to speak as Jason stood frozen, humiliated. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound echoing through the school grounds. And just like that, everything changed. The fear that had once hung over Willowbrook High had vanished. Jason's reign of terror was over, and in his place stood Alex, a quiet force who had just shown everyone that courage didn't need to shout. As Alex walked away, he knew one thing for certain: things would never be the same again. And neither would he. The next morning at Willowbrook High, the atmosphere was different. The halls, which had once been filled with whispers of fear and the oppressive silence that followed Jason's gang, now seemed lighter, freer. The students who had once avoided the bullies now walked with their heads held high. There was a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off everyone's shoulders. And all of it was thanks to Alex. Jason and his gang didn't show up to school that day. Rumor had it that they were too embarrassed, too ashamed to face their peers after the public defeat they had suffered behind the gym. But Alex knew better. He had seen the way Jason hesitated before the fight ended. He knew that Jason wasn't the type to simply accept defeat and move on. Jason was plotting, planning his next move. But for now, the school was a different place. Students spoke in hushed tones, exchanging stories about the fight. The scene behind the gym had quickly become the talk of Willowbrook. Everyone had witnessed Alex's calm and controlled response to Jason's gang. No one had expected it. No one had thought that the quiet, reserved new kid would be the one to stand up to the bullies and bring them to their knees. Even those who had once been too scared to even look at Jason's crew now walked the halls with a quiet confidence. The power dynamics at Willowbrook High had shifted, and Alex's actions had made sure of it. Later that afternoon, as Alex sat in the library trying to block out the noise of the school, he was approached by Mr. Reynolds, the history teacher who had observed the shift in the school's atmosphere with growing curiosity. "Alex," Mr. Reynolds said, pulling up a chair and sitting down next to him. "Mind if I ask you something?" Alex looked up, his eyes wary. "Depends on what it is." Reynolds studied him for a moment. "I heard about what happened behind the gym yesterday. You handled yourself pretty well. Most kids wouldn't have been able to do what you did. Where did you learn that?" Alex hesitated for a moment, unsure how much he should reveal. He wasn't the type to share personal details, especially with someone he didn't know well. But there was something in Mr. Reynolds' expression, something that made him feel like this wasn't just about school gossip. After a long pause, Alex spoke, his voice low. "My father trained me." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Your father? A fighter?" Alex nodded. "Yeah. He taught me everything he knew. He's a professional fighter." It all clicked for Mr. Reynolds. The way Alex carried himself with such poise, the calmness in the face of danger, it was all beginning to make sense. This wasn't some random new kid. Alex was trained, disciplined, and in control of his emotions. "You're not just a kid who got lucky, are you?" Mr. Reynolds said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You've been preparing for this moment for a long time." Alex didn't respond. He wasn't looking for praise. He was just doing what he had to do. Mr. Reynolds leaned in a little closer, his tone serious. "I'm glad you handled things the way you did, Alex. But be careful. This isn't just about schoolyard bullying anymore. Jason and his friends won't forget what happened. And they're not the type to let things slide. Alex met his gaze, his expression unreadable. I know. And I'm ready. But neither of them realized that Jason had been listening from just outside the library door. Jason had heard every word, and he knew now that Alex wasn't just another quiet kid who could be picked on. He was a fighter. And Jason had no intention of letting Alex walk away unscathed. Later that day, Jason gathered his gang, his anger and humiliation fueling his desire for revenge. He wasn't about to let some new kid embarrass him in front of the whole school. He would make sure Alex learned that you didn't challenge the king without facing consequences. The game was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Days passed and the tension at Willowbrook High remained thick in the air. The buzz surrounding Alex's victory behind the gym hadn't died down. In fact, it had only grown louder. The whispers had become stories and the stories had become legends. Students who had once cowered under Jason's rule now found themselves standing a little taller, walking with a little more pride. They had all witnessed what Alex had done. And now, the power that Jason and his gang once held seemed to be slipping away, piece by piece. But Jason wasn't one to give up easily. The humiliation he had suffered haunted him, and he wasn't about to let it define him. He needed to prove that he was still in charge, that no one, not even a trained fighter like Alex, could topple him from his throne. It didn't take long for Jason to make his move. One afternoon, he approached his gang and issued a challenge. We need to show him that we run this school. No more playing nice. His voice was low, laced with anger. After school, behind the gym. We finish this once and for all. The news spread quickly. The school buzzed with excitement and fear. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Another showdown, this time for all the marbles. It wasn't just about bullies and victims anymore. It was about pride, about control. Alex, however, was unfazed. He had already anticipated this. The confrontation was inevitable. He didn't need the crowds, the drama, or the attention. He knew what he was capable of, and that was all that mattered. He had no intention of letting Jason or anyone else drag him into their game. But there were lines that needed to be drawn, and Alex wasn't about to let anyone walk all over him. When the final bell rang that day, students spilled out of the school building like water from an overflowing river. They made their way behind the gym, where the showdown had been arranged. The space was dark, quiet, and filled with anticipation. The students stood in a loose circle, watching, waiting. The air was thick with tension. Alex arrived last, his steps steady, unhurried. He looked around the circle at Jason and his gang. 5 of them, all standing in a line, faces twisted in a mix of anger and confidence. They were ready, but Alex wasn't. Jason's eyes locked onto Alex, a smirk crossing his face. Did you really think you could walk away from this, new guy? He sneered. You're not as tough as you think. Alex didn't respond. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He was simply waiting. Without warning, Mason lunged at Alex, faster than the others had. But Alex had already seen it coming. In a flash, he sidestepped, grabbing Mason's arm and using his own momentum to flip him onto the hard ground. Mason grunted in pain, unable to move for a moment. The crowd gasped. No one had expected it to happen so quickly, so effortlessly. One of Jason's other goons rushed at Alex, throwing a wild punch. Alex ducked under it and twisted, driving his elbow into the bully's ribs. The guy staggered back, gasping for air. 2 down. The crowd was silent now, stunned by the speed and precision of Alex's moves. Jason's face twisted in fury. This wasn't going the way he had planned. He thought they would overwhelm Alex, but instead, it was happening the other way around. His gang was falling one by one, like dominoes. But Jason wasn't ready to give up. He called for the last 2 bullies to rush at Alex together, thinking that numbers would give them an advantage. But again, Alex was faster. He dodged their attacks with ease, his body moving like a shadow, fluid and precise. One of the bullies swung a punch at him, but Alex caught his wrist mid-swing, spun him around, and threw him into the other, knocking them both down. Only Jason was left standing. The crowd held its breath as Jason clenched his fists, his confidence slipping away. His eyes darted from the fallen members of his crew to Alex, who stood there, calm and collected, watching him with an unreadable expression. For the first time in Jason's life, he hesitated. He had always been the one in control, the one who made people fear him. But now, standing face to face with Alex, the fear crept in. Alex wasn't afraid of him. Alex wasn't afraid of anything. Jason's voice trembled as he tried to regain his composure. "You're nothing but a freak," he spat, trying to regain the upper hand. Alex didn't respond. He stepped forward, closing the gap between them. His eyes locked on Jason's. "You still think you run this place?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Jason's fists clenched tighter, but his resolve was cracking. He had no idea what to do, and Alex could see it in his eyes. For the first time, Jason wasn't the one holding all the power. Alex took a step back, his expression hardening. "You're not worth my time," he said flatly. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Jason standing there, humiliated, defeated. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices ringing out in the cold afternoon air. It was over. Alex had won. Not through brute force, but through discipline, precision, and control. And just like that, everything changed. As Alex walked away, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew what he had accomplished. And he knew that things at Willowbrook High would never be the same again. The days after the showdown behind the gym were quieter than Alex had expected. The chaos that followed Jason's defeat had settled into something different, peace. For the first time in years, Willowbrook High felt different. It was as if the fear that had hung over the students for so long had evaporated, replaced by a sense of freedom. The students who had once whispered behind their hands, hiding in the shadows of Jason's power, now walked with confidence, no longer afraid of the bullies who had once ruled the school. Jason, Mason, and the rest of his crew were nowhere to be seen. Rumors circulated that they were too ashamed to show their faces after the public beating they had suffered. For a moment, it seemed like the school might finally have a chance to breathe without the constant threat of intimidation. But Alex knew better than to think it was over. Jason wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. He was a fighter in his own way, and Alex could feel it in his bones, the calm before the storm. He wasn't going to let the story end like this, not without making a final statement. One afternoon, as Alex was walking home from school, he heard the familiar sound of footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. It was Jason, and this time he wasn't alone. Mason stood at his side, his face still bruised from the last fight, but he wasn't wearing his usual arrogant sneer. "Alex," Jason called out, his voice uncharacteristically calm. "We need to talk." Alex stopped in his tracks, but didn't turn around. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what was to come. For a moment, he considered walking away. He had nothing to prove, but something told him this was a moment he couldn't ignore. He slowly turned around to face them. Jason stood there, his arms folded, looking almost vulnerable. Mason, too, looked uncomfortable, as though he wasn't sure how to act in the presence of Alex's quiet strength. I was out of line," Jason began, his usual bravado gone. His voice was steady but lacked the arrogance it once had. "You made your point. You don't run from fights, and you don't let anyone push you around. We get it." Mason let out a sigh, looking down at the ground. "Yeah, we were idiots," he muttered, his eyes avoiding Alex's. "You were right. We shouldn't have messed with you." Alex studied them both, not sure what to make of this change. Jason, the same Jason who had ruled the school with an iron fist, now stood before him, apologizing? It didn't seem real. But maybe that was the lesson here. Sometimes it took the hardest battles to make people realize their own mistakes. Jason cleared his throat, taking a step forward. "Look, I'm not saying we're going to be friends or anything like that," he continued, still not meeting Alex's eyes. "But I just want to say that you proved something. You don't let anyone walk over you. You showed us all that." Alex felt a small smile tug at the corner of his lips. It wasn't the victory he had expected. There were no grand apologies, no over-the-top gestures, but it was a victory nonetheless. He had made his point, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like Willowbrook High had found a new sense of balance. "You figured it out eventually," Alex said, his voice quiet but strong. "Took you long enough. Jason scoffed, shaking his head, but there was no malice in his tone. Yeah, well, I guess even I can learn a lesson, he muttered, a reluctant grin spreading across his face. With that, he turned and started to walk away, Mason following closely behind. Alex watched them go, the weight of the moment sinking in. There was a strange sense of closure in the air. Jason and his gang weren't going to bother him anymore. They weren't the ones in control anymore. As Alex turned to continue on his way home, a sense of peace settled over him. He had come to Willowbrook with nothing but the quiet determination to live his life. And now, after everything that had happened, he was finally free. He had fought not just for himself, but for everyone who had been too afraid to stand up. His journey wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. It was about showing that strength didn't come from bullying others, but from the courage to walk away when necessary and the discipline to fight when it counted. And as he walked down the quiet street, he knew that, for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he needed to be. The town of Willowbrook had changed. And so had he. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our latest videos. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thank you all for taking the time to watch, and see you in the next video.